right, we are back. Thanks for tuning in to the second episode of the Hoop Light Productions podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed episode 1. It was definitely a fun learning experience for us. We expect this episode to be a lot better and more polished. Me and Chance just finished watching the first round of the draft, and we are excited to dive right into that. So, Chance, is there anything you want to talk about first?
I think the best thing to do is talk about the draft first, now that it's fresh in our minds. It was really exciting. I mean, there wasn't a lot of moves in the lottery, but after that, there was movement in pretty much every pick. So I thought it was a good draft overall.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, going into it, it felt like there was going to be a lot of suspenseful trades, like mid-lottery or even up towards the top, because Golden State had so much they could have done with their second pick. So we never really knew what would happen there. But we actually didn't get any of the big exciting trades we thought we'd get, but we did see a few players, in particular Tyrese Halliburton, fall a lot farther than we thought they would. And
right.
So that was interesting to see. So,
I mean, yeah, Toppin was the guy that fell for sure.
Yeah.
And then we had a couple of risers. I think Patrick Williams, he was, just up until like last week, he was projected outside of the top 10, but yeah. Chicago surprises everyone and takes him at 4. And then Okoro at 5 was also surprising. I expected him around, 6, anywhere from 6 to 12 or something like that, but it could end up being a pretty good pick for Cleveland, I think.
Yeah, Okoro was interesting because for me, probably for everybody, he was the clear-cut best on-ball defender in the draft. He's just so versatile because of his size and his speed and all of that. But, yeah, I don't know about the pick from Cleveland. I mean, I just feel like they had so much other ways to go. They needed a scorer, maybe someone to bring in seats, and Okoro, that's not what he does.
Right.
I mean, but the thing about all these players is they're all young, and, I mean, you never know what they'll be a few years into their career or even as rookies.
Right. I would say Cleveland's pick was the L of the top 10. I think pretty much every other team got a guy that, just a better fit overall. I'm not sure the fit there with Okoro. I mean, Cleveland wasn't a bad defensive team, but they were just pretty awful on the offensive end. I'm just not sure Okoro brings anything on offense right away.
Yeah, I agree with everything about Okoro. That's an interesting pick for them. But another thing, in our first episode where we were talking about, you had mentioned how it was weird to see Chicago not at 7, because they always have 7. And you'd think in their first draft in a while where they're at a top pick like 4 that they wouldn't go for a guy that's necessarily seen as a reach. Like, you'd think they'd take that Denny or Obi who was on the board or any of those guys.
I mean, yeah, they seem confident with the pick. Williams, I'm not sure he's going to come in and start right away. I think Otto Porter will be their guy for the first year at least. But, I mean, he has one of the highest ceilings in the draft, really athletic. So, I mean, I think in the long run it could be a really good pick for them.
Yeah. So, I guess we can talk about Tyrese Halliburton. I mean,
he steal of the draft at 12, in our opinion.
Steal for sure to fall to the Kings. It's really interesting because before the draft, you were hearing about how much everybody from people like us who are just doing our own research on the guy, how much guys like us love him. And
we couldn't find a weakness, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then not only us, but the official scouts and GMs, they all seem to love him. So I don't know.
Right. We were just watching the draft, and even Jay Billis had him at 4. So for him to fall to 12, for Sacramento, that's a great fit. I'm not sure the fit with Halliburton. I mean, Sacramento has proven time and time again to just not be able to develop their young guys.
Yeah.
And they've had a lot of picks in the top 15, so I'm just not sure how it is for Halliburton, but for the Kings, it's a great pick.
Yeah, I mean, even you look at a guy like De'Aaron Fox, who's been their best pick in a long time. I won't say he hasn't developed, but how different is he really from his first rookie year, his second year? Like, he's a really good player, and I think Halliburton will help him a lot. But it'll just be interesting to see how Halliburton can grow. And, so yeah.
I mean, I think the right thing to do here would be, let's just talk about some of the winners and the biggest losers of the draft. Um, I mean, I think, like we said before, I think the Kings getting Halliburton at 12, they'd have to be a winner no matter who they take the rest of the draft. Obi Toppin falling to 8 to the Knicks, that's a great pick for them. Kongwu at 6, that wasn't too surprising. In the top 3, we actually predicted right on, so shout out to us.
Yeah, I mean, hey.
I mean, it wasn't the hardest thing to predict if there's no trades, but that was the thing. Like, we thought there would be movement in the top 3.
I think Okongwu at 6 is really interesting because they have John Collins at the 4. I don't think they have any plans on moving him from anytime soon. And then Capella, they just got him from Houston, but I mean, there's a great chance they move Capella.
Yeah.
Or they just let Okongwu come off the bench and develop first. I mean, I guess we probably shouldn't just expect him to start.
Yeah, I think you can start Capella or Okongwu, right? I mean, maybe Capella starts, but I mean, his contract isn't bad enough to where you can't slide him on the bench. I mean, there's not an ego there with the big contract and he promises. So, I mean, yeah, I think the pick, it was a safe pick, if anything. I thought they might take we had them taking Halliburton with the 6th pick. I think they need another guard besides Trae Young that can play make. So I think free agency will be the time that they get that guy.
Yeah, and then I agree with all that. So let's talk about your Pistons. I mean, from a lot of people I've been talking to since watching the draft, a lot of people are saying that they're the winners of the draft. They're the best draft. So what do you think?
I mean, yeah, for us, the lack of assets that we had going in, and then for us to get 3 picks in the top 19. I mean, not just that, but the fact that I think we hit in all the picks, right? I mean, Killian Hayes at 6, he has probably the highest ceiling of a point guard besides LaMelo Ball in the draft. And
I agree.
Let's see, we had Isaiah Stewart. He'll come in right away. Depending if we re-sign Christian Wood, he'll be either the starter or backup center for us. And then Sadiq Bey, huge steal at 19. He'll come in right away. Probably start at the 3 for us. Great on defense. Shot the 3 at, 45% at Villanova. So
yeah, I mean, at the very least, he's
right.
better than Tony Snell.
For the Pistons, like what they had coming in and what they have coming out of the draft, I think they were the biggest winners pretty easily.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, you were talking about this earlier, and I agree. Be really interesting to see the connection between Killian Hayes and Sekou.
Right, the French connection. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully they get those guys on the court together a lot.
It's
I have
exciting.
a feeling they will.
Right, as a Pistons fan, this is honestly the most excited I've been. Like, I think the last 10 years there just hasn't been a lot to like be cheerful of. But I think with us getting 3 young guys, I think each pick was really good for where they were. And, I'm just really excited to be a fan right now.
Yeah, it's a good time. A lot of promise. And hopefully when this is over, at least over enough to get fans in the stadiums at a certain capacity, hopefully Killian can get them in there because that's exactly what you guys need.
Now let's talk about some of the reaches. We kind of talked about the Williams and Okoro, so we won't talk about that, but I think Jalen Smith was a really surprising pick for the Suns at 10.
Yeah, and you really like Jalen Smith going into
it. Right, he was my sleeper. I don't think a sleeper should go at 10, but
yeah, sleeper.
I think it'll be a good pick.
Sleeper is more of a guy that you would see as a steal at the spot he was taken, not necessarily this guy deserves to be at this spot. We definitely had the Suns taking Devin Vassell like everybody else on the planet.
Yeah.
Tyrese Halliburton was on there. I mean, that's a great pick for Phoenix if he's on the board. Even Aaron Naismith. With Chris Paul, obviously, they're not. I mean, Halliburton and Cole Anthony both play the point, but probably not Cole Anthony, but at least Halliburton could slide to the 2. I don't think it's a bad pick. It's just interesting that they took him all the way at 10.
It'll be interesting to see what they do with whatever money they have in free agency because they didn't address the need that we thought they originally had. So that's really interesting. Another, what we thought was a reach, but I think he can be a good player, is Kyra Lewis at 13 to the Pelicans. I'm not sure I mean, I'm not sure what the thought was there besides his talent, right? I mean, they just traded for Eric Bledsoe. Is he on the move again?
Yeah.
And then, honestly, Lonzo Ball, who's shown promise, but he's also had times where he's just a complete liability on the offensive end. So that was a really interesting pick for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to criticize the pick because, along with Sam Presti and a few other guys that are at the GM spot in the league, David Griffin's not a guy that makes a lot of mistakes.
Right.
So I don't want to say that it's a bad pick. It's just interesting. To me, Bledsoe has to be on the move. I mean, I don't see what the point of taking him when they already have Zoe and
Right.
Bledsoe. I mean, I
That's
don't
three
know.
guys. That's three guards that are gonna want the ball, and I mean they're gonna want to play right away. So I think Bledsoe should be on the move. I think I'm about 90% sure he is on the move again. Probably to a contender, honestly.
Yeah. So speaking of, or we can talk about something that's not steals or reaches. LaMelo Ball is taken third to the Hornets, the biggest name in the draft for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are your thoughts about like what they're gonna do guard play wise? I mean, obviously he'll probably start right away. I don't see why he wouldn't. But
Yeah.
they have two guards already, so
I mean, if they go into next season, LaMelo will be the starting point
yeah.
guard. With Rozier, I think he comes off the bench, and Devontae Graham.
Slide to the two. Well, he was already at the two. So.
Right. I mean, it's just a big question what they do defensively, right? Because
Yeah.
LaMelo obviously has his questions defensively, and then Devontae Graham, he's 6'1".
Yeah,
There's a lot of two guards that I don't think he'll be able to guard, so I think LaMelo is going to have a tall task coming up for him to guard some of the shooting guards that are in the league.
And he always had the size when he was drafted, but his older brother Lonzo, he was not looked at as a lockdown defender coming out of UCLA.
Right.
He's used his size to do that, and I don't know who's been training him or been in his ear about that, but if it has anything to do with his father or the family, then you better know LaMelo's going to do the same thing. So we'd like to see that.
I mean, it's going to be all about buying in for LaMelo on the defensive end. I think he has the frame to do it for sure.
Because that's the thing about LaMelo. Like, we had Anthony Edwards number 1, we had Wiseman 2, and you can make the argument that they're the better prospects. But if LaMelo early in his career becomes a good or above average defender, I mean, he's instantly like, that's got to be the best player in the draft. I mean, because his potential offensively is through the roof. So
him and Edwards, I say, have the highest ceiling for sure.
Yeah. Speaking of Edwards, do you want to talk about his comments before the draft?
Yeah, really questionable. Not sure if you want to be talking about going to the NFL.
Yeah.
The day before you're going to the NBA, he said, what did he say? He doesn't like basketball outside of the court.
He said he doesn't like to watch basketball, which is fine. I mean, people like me and Chance, we feed ourselves with basketball.
Right.
But
right.
I'm not expecting someone who plays it for. He's a pro. I mean, he plays it for a living. I don't expect him to.
And I'm sure there's a lot of guys like that in the league, right? Once they're off the court, they're gonna want to do something else, right?
Yeah.
Because they pretty much eat, sleep, breathe basketball. So
the comment "I don't like to watch" didn't really bother me. The comment of
the timing
if the NFL,
of the comment.
He said that if the NFL reached out to me to draft me today, I'd go now. That concerns me because I don't know what he wants to do with his career. I mean, we saw the Timberwolves. He's now getting compared to a guy they took a while back with Andrew Wiggins, who I don't want to call him a bust because Andrew Wiggins is still a above average quality NBA player.
Overpaid.
But and overdrafted because people look at his motor. They say that's the only reason he's not as elite as he should be. And I'm not saying Anthony Edwards can't be great and he's not going to be Andrew Wiggins or he's going to be Andrew Wiggins, but his personality definitely gives me those vibes based off what he said.
Right. I think 5 years from now, if that personality, like you said, comes back to haunt him in the league, like we're going to be talking about guys taken later in the draft that should have gone number 1 to Minnesota.
Yeah, I agree.
But at the same time, he could also, and he should be the best player in this draft, right? He can score at all 3 levels on the floor.
Just a bucket.
He's just a bucket. He's got the frame to defend too. And I think Minnesota really needs that. So I think he'll be okay. He's just gotta keep his head on straight. Hopefully, Cat and D'Lo can kind of guide him as he proceeds in the NBA. But yeah, I still like the pick for Minnesota.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I don't want to say steal. I would say somewhat of a steal. I think one of the best picks in the draft was 14, Aaron Naismith going to the Celtics. I mean, he was right there, and they had the ability to just grab the best shooter in the draft. I mean, there's some other guys like Sadiq Bey and some other guys that can really shoot from outside, but Aaron Naismith has been looked at as, like I said in the last episode, that Duncan Robinson, that early on Klay Thompson, that guy that's going to be asked to do nothing but shoot the ball and then develop from there on.
Right, and as a contending team for the Celtics, I think Naismith, you could plug him in right away. Any franchise finds value in shooting, and that's exactly what Naismith brings. So, I mean, that was a huge gift for the Celtics. I had Naismith going 13 to the Pelicans, I believe, and they could have used him, but they had Kyrie Lewis, which is fine. Celtics take Naismith, and I think that'll be good for them in the long run.
Yeah. I think Naismith would have fit better with the Pelicans in terms, like, if I was David Griffin, I would have definitely taken him just because he's a better fit. But
Right.
Kyrie Lewis, again, not a bad pick, but Aaron Naismith, I mean, the Celtics have this weird routine of just taking the best guy at their spot every time, and this looks like another one of those picks.
Right.
And,
Credit to Danny Ainge for sure. Does it again.
Yep. And then we saw my team, the Oklahoma City Thunder, trade their 25th pick and the 28th pick, along with Rubio, sent him back to Minnesota to get the 17th pick. So they traded up there. And for me, that was really interesting because there are certain guys that are really good role players that I thought maybe we'd go after. Naismith was one of those guys.
But you guys took the project player for sure.
Yeah, we took Alexei Pokashevsky, who I had analyzed him before the draft, and it was kind of funny because we weren't sure exactly where he'd go, but the fact that he went early at 17 to my Thunder is interesting. And I was on social media, and I seen all sorts of Thunder fans not fond of the pick, but I don't know. He's like you said, he's definitely a project, and we have so much we could work with. We have the next 23 great 7th graders, so
Pretty much.
So Pokashevsky, I mean, it'll be interesting. He gets comparisons to Porzingis. I don't know if I'd say that. He doesn't have Porzingis' size in terms of build, but it'll be interesting. He can shoot it from the outside, and if he is able to develop fast, I think he's a really good replacement for Gallinari, who's going to be gone.
I think he fits the timeline for the Thunder, right? I mean, they've traded pretty much every player in the roster by now for picks, and they're just headed into a rebuild. So I think there's not going to be a lot of pressure for Pokachevsky to contribute right away. I think he can develop, maybe play in the G League a little bit, but I think it's a great situation for him in OKC.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, so Detroit trades up for 2 picks, 10 through 20. We had Isaiah Stewart. This was actually the first trade up.
Yeah, and you weren't fond of this at first. So
I wasn't because I wanted Sadiq Bey, who obviously we took at 19. But now that I look at it, right, we get Killian Hayes, high potential point guard. And then Isaiah Stewart, the center out of where was he? Where was he at? He was at Washington, right? And then we got my guy Sadiq Bey, who I think will be more of a contributor than Stewart is. But yeah, I just really liked what the Pistons did, and I'm not even trying to be biased here, but I just think for a team with the little assets that they have, for them to get 3 guys in the top 19 was huge for them in the next coming years.
Yeah, like we said, we already talked about Detroit having probably the best draft, but they continued to show it throughout the draft. Like, they made multiple moves with their new...
Yeah, they moved up to 38, too, and took another guy that could maybe contribute next year.
And Weaver, what's his first name?
Troy.
Troy Weaver, the new GM. He seems to bring a new, fresh environment there. He definitely has made some good moves already, and I think he's going to do a lot of good for them. Another... I don't want to say he dropped because he was seen as a late first round and second round, but a guy that I had as a steal of the draft was Tyrell Terry, and he went to Dallas at 31, and gosh, they couldn't have took a better pick. I mean, they traded Seth Curry to Philly, So now they have another shooter who's just has incredible basketball IQ, and I don't know how much he'll play right away due to the fact that Jalen Brunson is also a very solid player that they got.
I think he'll be the backup for sure.
You think so? Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of depth at point guard for Dallas. I mean, Luka can obviously play the point guard, but if you want to talk about pure
DeLon
point
Wright as
guards,
well.
Tyrell Terry's really the only other guy. I mean, I guess they have J.J. Barea too. But
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was a really good pick by them, and they're in a position right now where they're young, but they're already super competitive. So, best player available is a great position for them, and I think
Right.
it was Tyrell Terry.
Right.
I think that was.
I think Tyrell Terry is the best player available at 20. So for them to get
Yeah.
him at 31 was huge for them. I think Mark Cuban's smiling out of his teeth right now, honestly.
Yeah. I would be very happy if I was Mark Cuban or any Dallas fan.
Dallas is the team that can definitely make some noise in the Western Conference this year. And there's a lot of teams that can make noise in the West next year for sure.
Yeah. The addition of Tyrell is just. It's going to be really good for them. And then at 21, another pick I liked. I think Tyrell Terry could have gone here, but this is a good pick too. 76ers took Tyrese Maxey, guard out of Kentucky, and he's not similar to Anthony Edwards in play style, but like Anthony Edwards, he's just a bucket. Like he played my Spartans and he just destroyed us. He was shooting from everywhere, getting in the lane, and that's the type of player he is, and that's the type of player that Philly definitely needs. They need outside shooting, and he'll do that for them.
Right. I think I like Maxey at 21 for sure. Let's see. Philly's made a lot of moves lately. They just brought in Danny Green. They brought in Seth Curry. Got rid of the Horford contract. I think the happiest person out of that would definitely be Embiid. I think he will be the guy in the post now. A lot more space for him to work, and I just think he'll be better because of it. And honestly, Philly will be better because of it. And when you think they just lacked shooting last year, and they pretty much already taken care of that before free agency even began.
Yeah. Thing about the Al Horford trade, he went to my Thunder. Not sure what we're going to do with him. I think it was more of, we'll take Horford off your hands for a first round
But that
pick.
makes you wonder what you guys do with Steven Adams now, who's an expiring deal as well.
And I got no problem with that. I love Steven Adams. He's grown here. I just don't know what our ceiling is without a center that can at least stretch it from mid-range, which he just doesn't do. And, that's just how the game is today. So as long as we get something valuable out of him, then I have no problem moving on from Steven. The thing about Al Horford, though, there's a lot of players, like the guy that played for my Thunder, Chris Paul, who, when he was in Houston, he had a down year that dropped his stock a lot. But everyone knew he could still hoop, right? It'll be interesting to see what Al Horford does wherever he goes, if he stays here or if we move him. Because Al Horford was just straight up bad in Philly. He had a really bad year, and he made...
I don't think Al Horford's a bad player necessarily, but it's just the fit there was always questionable from the day they signed him, right?
Yeah, he was supposed to play the 4 and somehow stretch the floor, which he can shoot, but he's not mobile enough
in
to
the early
play the
2000s, that's a great move, right?
Yeah.
Horford and Embiid, but nowadays, I just think Horford is better suited at the 5, and with him in OKC, if Steven Adams is still there, that's still a questionable fit for him. So I'm not sure that's a great thing for him. But if they do move Adams and he can play the 5, I think he'll have a much better year.
Yeah, I agree.
Still overpaid, but I think he'll be able to produce pretty well.
You looked at the times when when Embiid went down and Al Horford was on the floor, he was so much better now. He wasn't Al Horford from Boston the year before.
No.
I don't think he's that guy anymore. I'm not sure.
He's pretty old.
Yeah, but he was definitely better than when we saw him at the 4. He's not a 4. He's a 5. And I think that in a new environment, it will be a lot better for him. And a new environment for Horford will be a lot better for Philadelphia, and especially Joel Embiid. So, yeah.
Moving on from that, I think the Nuggets were kind of a surprising team here, right? Moving into the first round to get 2 picks. They take Zeke Naji, the center out of Arizona, with 22.
Mm-hmm.
And then they moved up with Milwaukee to get R.J. Hampton, who I think at 24 is really good value.
You see, the thing about Denver is they have this tendency, I was telling you during the draft, to just similar to Boston, but they take the guys that maybe have more red flags, to just take the guy that, you know, has a lot of promise, but necessarily isn't super high up because of either holes or injuries. Like they took Michael Porter Jr. after his back injury, and if you watch the bubble, that sure seems to be looking out if he looking good if he stays healthy. And they took Bull for the same reason. And the few games he played in the bubble, he was a freak, in a good way. And R.J. Hampton's another one of those guys. He didn't have an injury, but when he came, like I said in the last episode again, he came out of high school super talked about, very high up, and that's why people were really surprised when he went overseas.
I think if RJ went to college, he would have ended up being drafted higher, but he did struggle playing professional ball in Australia. But I mean, going back to what we said about the Nuggets, it just makes sense that they draft those project guys, right? I mean, they've already got the pieces, so at this point they're just hoping they get lucky and getting another piece to go along with what they already have as a championship contender. So I like what they did with Najee and Hampton. I mean, you really can't go wrong with either guy.
Yeah, I agree completely. And then at 32, the Hornets, right after the Tyrell Terry pick, they took Vernon Carey, center out of Duke. Vernon Carey was really interesting. I didn't realize he averaged, 17 or was it 19 in college?
It's like pretty much a 19-point double-double. I mean,
yeah, I think he's one of the most underrated prospects in this draft. Like he did so well in college and in high school. I mean,
right. It's surprising that he's flown under the radar, right? Because he was the second highest rated center coming out of the 2019 class behind Wiseman, right? And Wiseman went 2. So Carey at 32 for the Hornets. They were a team that Wiseman was in the discussion for them to trade up and get him, but obviously the Warriors were very content in getting Wiseman. So for them to get Vernon Carey at 32 and then LaMelo Ball at 3, I think they're also one of the winners of the draft.
Especially when they have Cody Zeller and Bismack Biyombo getting paid like Bill Gates out there.
I mean, the Hornets are pretty much just all the guys that just have the worst contracts in the league, and it kind of goes back to Jordan and just how he has been as good of a GM as he has been a player.
No, not at all. Be interesting. At the same time, he's Michael Jordan, so who's going to tell him that he can't be in charge of that team anymore? And like I said, it would be funny to see when LeVar said back a few years ago that he'd beat Michael Jordan. Well, now he's got his chance, so we'll see that.
He'll be in the facility at least once or twice. So
yeah,
I think Jordan's ready for the smoke. If anybody is, it's Jordan.
Yeah.
Some of the guys, I guess we haven't talked about James Wiseman yet. I mean, This was probably the most obvious pick, right? I mean,
yeah, we had him at 2 in our mock draft too.
I mean, I think for the Warriors, it was disappointing news today seeing that Clay hurt his leg again.
Yeah,
they were looking forward to competing for a title again, and I think that's. I think it's pretty much just thrown out the window if Clay's not in that lineup, right? I mean, Steph needs Clay, and Clay needs Steph for them to be competing for titles. So,
yeah, you can only do so much with one outside shooter, even if it's Steph Curry. Right. Like, someone has to take attention away from the other guy, and it sucks, man. I mean, as a Thunder fan, I've always hated the Warriors during their dynasty just because of how dominant they've been. But I also
they ruined the Thunder dynasty by Clay hitting 13 threes in one game, pretty much carrying them.
Don't forget they also took Kevin Durant from us. So, with all that said, obviously you have massive respect for it. Easily, I mean, it's not even close. It's really not close. The greatest shooting backcourt ever.
Right.
And
I think the Warriors were the team of the decade for sure.
Yeah, and sadly, I mean, without Clay, that could be over. Hopefully, I mean, I'm hearing sadly that it's a good chance it was Achilles tear, which means out again for at least another year, and that means he's coming back even less all around, especially defensively.
Right, and it's disappointing, really, as an NBA fan. Like, I mean, I've been one to trash the Warriors in the past for signing KD, but at the end of the day, the NBA is a better place when Klay Thompson and Curry are playing together. I mean, they're just so much fun to watch. So that's disappointing. But back to our fact about Wiseman, it was definitely the right pick.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everybody's been saying it. He's instantly the best center they've had during their entire dynasty.
Right.
The dude can do everything. He can
Right. If
score.
they've won championships with Zaza Pachulia, I think they can definitely win one with James Wiseman.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Wiseman can do a lot more than Zaza or JaVale McGee, who had a really good year with LA, but I mean, James Wiseman is just that guy.
And I think another guy that's kind of overlooked on the Warriors would be, well, Draymond Green, first of all, right? Because I just think he elevates his game so much when he has Curry and Clay. But another guy who they got at the trade deadline is Wiggins.
Yeah.
Which it'll be really interesting to see what he does with really good guys around him, because he hasn't had that kind of a situation in his career. I think him being a third option could do a lot of wonders for his efficiency and just pretty much will to win as a player, which we haven't seen at all.
And I mean, that comes back to Klay Thompson. Like, you look in the year that they won in 2015, and in 2016 they didn't win, but how dominant they were. They had Harrison Barnes at the three, standing outside shooting.
Right.
Andrew Wiggins may have not lived up to the potential we thought he had, but he's Harrison Barnes at the least. So I think if Klay's back and they got Wiseman, and I think Draymond complements Wiseman very well, I think they could be dominant, and in that case, if they're dominant, Andrew Wiggins can absolutely fill that role. So, yeah, I think he's a really underrated piece for them.
Yeah, I think another steal for us would have to be Denny Avdija at 9. I think Avdija is the guy that we had going 4 to the Bulls, and then if he fell past there, I thought Cleveland would snag him up, but they took another guy at his position in Okoro. But yeah, I think the Wizards got the right pick here. Avdija was the best guy available, the highest potential for sure. And I just think it's a position of need for them as well, right? He can pair alongside Wall, Beal. I still think the center position's a massive hole for them, but I think they'll get that figured out in free agency. So, Avdija to Washington.
Yeah, I think it's a really good pick for them. 9 is crazy. He dropped that far. I mean,
right, that was surprising.
He's the best 3 they've had in a long time. I mean, who'd they have? I mean, they had Otto Porter for a while.
Right, they had
Paul Pierce at the end.
His career, yeah.
He hit a few big shots.
I want to say Troy Brown Jr. was playing the 3 for them, and he's fine, right? But I just don't.
Young player, yeah.
Like, there's upgrades from Troy Brown at the 3.
Yeah,
right?
and with John Wall returning, expecting that they keep him, he's just he complements him very well. If John Wall can be half the player he was before with Bradley Beal's big jump, so I agree with that.
Right, and if I'm the GM of the Wizards, right, I think going in, I think Okoro and Okongwu are your guys that are probably available, but they get taken earlier than expected. So Denny Avdija falls, and I think that's a massive W for them for sure.
So yeah, that's about as much as we got for our reaction to the draft immediately. But in our last episode, one of the things we talked about a lot was trade rumors and stuff, and
one of them was Drew Holiday, and he ended up getting traded, so we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, one of the trade rumors you had was Milwaukee, right?
Right, yep. Yeah. I think they gave up way more than even I said, and I had them giving up a lot for what they had, right, and what the value of Drew Holiday is compared to what they gave up. But I think for the Pelicans, I think it'll be good for both sides, because I think the Bucks with Drew Holiday can take them over the top, right? I mean, and I think another thing is, if Giannis comes back because of the Drew Holiday trade, I think giving up all those picks will be worth it, because if Giannis is on your team, you're not going to have a high pick, right? I mean, a late first rounder is not going to have much value anyway. So
that's what I was going to point to. Obviously, Drew Holiday is a very underrated player and he instantly makes them so much better. So
they needed perimeter scoring for sure.
It's not that they didn't trade for Drew Holiday all that they did because they don't think he's worth that, but I think the main reason they traded all of that for Drew Holiday was to keep Giannis. Right. I mean, they didn't have an option, and I think New Orleans was probably aware of that. They probably
Right.
thought, okay, let's get as much as we can because they want Holiday because they want to keep Giannis.
Right.
And he's so. We talked about this with the Clippers when they got Paul George. We were like, can you imagine being on the opposing team and you go up against Patrick Beverly, Paul George, and Kawhi Leonard?
Right.
I think that's another situation in Milwaukee. Imagine you're a really good offensive player and you're getting clamped up by Drew Holiday and you somehow make a move to get past him and you run to the paint. You got to score on Giannis.
Giannis, and then Brook Lopez
Yeah,
as well, an all
yeah.
defensive guy. So
Yeah.
they got something brewing in
And they got
Milwaukee for
Bogdanovich
sure.
as well, who's not a he's a bucket.
He's not a big name.
And-
He's kind of flown under the radar in Sacramento, which pretty much everyone has. But
and he's not a great defender, but he's by no means a bad defender, and he's their
right,
weakest
and
link
he'll have
defensively.
enough. Right, and he'll have enough guys around him to where
Middleton as
his
well.
defensive woes won't be noticeable.
Yeah, they already were last year, but I think the chances of any team being a better defensive team than Milwaukee next year are super low. Like,
Right.
in terms of just
They've
all-
already been good in the regular season, but I think it'll really show up in the playoffs because Drew Holiday has proven before to be an even better player in
Yeah,
the playoffs, and I just think that could be a move that gets Giannis to stay, and then it could also be a move that gets him a title. So I like it for both sides, really. I mean, the Pelicans kind of continue the rebuild. They got more assets, right? 3 first-round picks, 2 pick swaps. I just think the big thing for Milwaukee is if Giannis doesn't stay, which I almost promise he will now that they've done these trades. If he leaves, I mean, what was the point? You just gave up your entire future, and you don't have the MVP on your team anymore, right? They
Yeah.
could be in deep trouble with that, but I think Giannis stays for sure now.
And the thing about Milwaukee is they're similar to other teams like maybe Charlotte or the Charlotte or the Thunder. They got to do everything they can to keep Giannis because they're not in a big market and they're not going to sign.
Most likely they'll never have a player like Giannis again.
No, absolutely not. They would have to draft that guy, and I mean they're not going to sign. It just doesn't happen.
You're right. There hasn't been another Giannis or anything
Yeah.
close to what he's been. So
Yeah.
give him every amount of money that you can in free agency. for sure.
Yeah, and then another one of the trade rumors we were talking about was James Harden, and nothing's happened yet. But I remember when we talked about the specific trade, which was James Harden to Brooklyn.
That's where he wants to go now.
My exact words were, "This is definitely the least realistic of all the trades." Give it a day later, and we're hearing about how much he wants to go there, which doesn't surprise me. But what does surprise me is how high the chances are.
Right. I mean, I don't think at this point if Harden wants to go to Brooklyn, like Harden will end up in Brooklyn. Like superstars just
He's got all the leverage.
like yes, exactly. Superstars have that kind of leverage, and I think for Houston, Brooklyn has some pretty good assets to get.
I think you got to do it if you're Houston. You're put against a wall, and you're getting. I feel like Brooklyn has to have the best package.
Brooklyn, I feel like would give up all their picks to have Kyrie, James Harden, and Kevin Durant, obviously. So it'll be really interesting to see how that goes down. Like
That's a lot of personality on one team for Steve Nash. I'll tell you that.
in one ball.
Yeah.
I think KD can play off the ball, but I think
Well,
go ahead.
the thing about Harden though is I think people underestimate his ability to play off the ball. He was put in a system with D'Antoni where
It's catered to him.
he's been told never play off the ball. I mean, you look at Steve Nash. Steve Nash played off the ball a lot in Dallas when he was with Dirk. I mean, he was still the main point guard, but he didn't control the ball every possession. He goes to Phoenix, he controls the ball every possession. You take a guy like Jeremy Lin, who when D'Antoni was in New York, Jeremy Lin led the league in dribbles and possessions
Right.
in his little stretch he had. So I don't know if it's a James Harden thing, because when James Harden was in Oklahoma City, he wasn't the main ball handler. Now he did come off the
Not
bench.
only was he not the main ball handler, he didn't even start. He came off the bench.
Yeah, I don't think he's a selfish player. We don't know because it's been so long since he's been asked to do anything but control the ball at all times.
And that'll be the question for them. Not so much how much talent they have on the roster, just putting those personalities and those guys together, right? If they put it together, I mean, you have to put them as championship favorites, right? Like, three
easily.
guys that good, it's special,
I was
really.
thinking this the other day. It really speaks to LeBron's greatness. Like,
Right.
this is another super team being built to stop him from winning a championship.
Right.
You got to do what you got to do.
Right. LeBron goes west, and you see some of these West teams trading their stars now, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
all these guys going
that's
east.
the LeBron effect.
It's crazy. And he's, how old is LeBron now?
LeBron is 36.
36.
Not slowing down
Not
either.
slowing down.
Don't
He's
see any
36,
signs.
and he's got people making super teams to stop him.
Right.
It's
incredible.
So, yeah, I think that's the most likely in that situation. Another guy we talked about was Russell Westbrook.
And, yeah, I mean, I don't think Westbrook goes to a contender.
No.
I heard the Clippers, but it just doesn't make sense. Him and Kawhi. I just don't see the fit with him and any superstar anymore, right?
No.
He didn't prove to work with Paul George, and he didn't prove to work with James Harden. I just think
The Paul George one is weird because Paul George did have the best season of his entire career with Russell Westbrook. But we saw when it got to the playoffs that, I mean, Paul George was somewhat hurt in his shoulder, but still, they didn't gel well together. So I can't disagree with you on that. But I agree that he doesn't go to a contender. They just
right. He needs to be given the keys to a franchise, and I think he can create a lot of excitement for a team like the Knicks, Charlotte, who definitely won't trade for Westbrook now that LaMelo Ball was taken. But
no, Charlotte's out of the picture.
I just don't think, maybe they trade James Harden and keep Westbrook, and he can be the guy. But yeah, it'll be really interesting. I don't see either of them getting traded anytime soon, though, to be honest.
Yeah, one thing we heard, which we both disclosed we don't think will happen, was the trade for John Wall. But, I mean, I don't see the point of that. Like, just another older point guard with injuries.
Right.
Athletic, hyper-athletic. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, so we didn't really have to talk about that. But
there were some other trades, too. We had Robert Covington going to the Blazers.
I think that's great for the Blazers. He just fits so well with them, and they've been looking.
It's a need for sure, and he covers pretty much all of
defense
it.
and shooting on the outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really good trade for them. To go really
Houston's end, they get what? Did they get a first?
They got a first for Robert Covington.
Did they use that pick tonight, or did they move it? I want to say. I guess we can look, but
I think they moved it, right?
Yeah, I think they removed it, but yeah, they got a protected first next year as well.
Yep.
And Ariza, who was then moved to Detroit, and then moved again, right? So that's how the Pistons ended up getting up to 16. But yeah, that was a really interesting trade. We had Schroeder. He was the first pick of the offseason.
Schroeder to
that's huge for the Lakers.
I mean, yeah, the Lakers.
As dominant as they were in the playoffs, I think a playmaking point guard and a scorer is a huge need for them still, and they filled that with Schroeder.
Yeah, I mean, you saw when LeBron would. I mean, obviously they won the championship, so they were good enough already. But you saw during the regular season, especially, LeBron went off to the bench, and the team really fell apart. Like, Anthony Davis is a great big man, and he's a great player, but he's complimentary because of the fact that he doesn't distribute. Like, I don't expect Anthony Davis to do that, but someone has to come out there and control the ball and run the offense. And we saw one of the reasons they won the championship is because Rondo was their third best player at that time, and he just playoff Rondo's real. And I can tell you as a Thunder fan, there's no playoff Schroeder. There's just Schroeder, and he's a bucket at all times, and he can pass the ball, and he's actually a really underrated defender. So I think they're gonna lose Rondo. I don't know where he goes, but
Danny Green's out the door too now.
Yeah, so Schroeder for them. I mean, he can make shots late in games. I think he's gonna be.
I think the key for the Lakers in free agency, I think, is getting Caldwell Pope back because he works so well with LeBron.
Yeah, and people are gonna realize how good Schroeder is. Playing in OKC is not a big market.
He should have been the sixth man of the year last year.
Yeah.
Right, he averaged 19, passed the ball well. I mean, you think about it, he played with Chris Paul, and he played with
and Shea.
Right, two guards that are really good. So I think he could have a bigger role with the Lakers, even if LeBron and AD are there.
Yeah. I mean, we saw him, his biggest role probably ever was in Atlanta, but he was younger and he didn't have the weapons he had.
Right, he was the backup for Jeff Teague for a little while there.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see Schroeder. I think that was one of the biggest moves by any of the teams.
Was there any other trades that we could go over?
Did I remember? I'm sure I'm forgetting something.
I mean, there was a little Bruce Brown trade to Brooklyn. Nobody really cares, though, to be honest. But
we could sit here and talk about Bruce Brown forever, but no one.
As a Pistons fan, I will say I liked his ability to guard the best player on the other team, but wasn't afraid. He represented Detroit well, but I think Brooklyn got a really good player for sure.
Which reminds me, I mean, you already talked about what you guys got back for this player, but I'm curious as to what you think. In terms of the Luke Kennard trade, like, are you glad he's out, or how do you feel about that?
I mean, it really depended on who we got at 19, right? That's what we gave up. But to give up Luke Kennard, you got to replace him, and I think what we got was Saddiq Bey at 19.
Who can defend, and like you told me earlier.
Right, Luke Kennard is statistically the worst perimeter defender in the league, right?
Yep.
You can talk about what he does on the offensive end, but at the end of the day, your team needs defense to win titles, and Saddiq Bey brings it on the defensive end, and he could be a better shooter from the outside than Luke Kennard. So, in terms of value, the 19th pick usually wouldn't be good enough for Luke Kennard, but when Saddiq Bey is on the board, I really like the pick for my Pistons.
Yeah, I agree completely.
We could talk about. Let's just do a segment on Sam Presti.
Yeah, that's what I was about.
I mean, we could talk about this guy for an hour and how many picks.
He's a wizard,
just based
man.
off the picks he's gotten.
I mean, let's start. As a Thunder fan, I remember it was middle of the night. I was laying in my bed, and the two bombs hit at the same time. Kawhi Leonard to the Clippers, and I was like, "Oh, great for the Clippers."
Right.
And then a few seconds later, Paul George to the Clippers. And at the time, I wouldn't say I was upset because I knew it was time to move on after Dame just ruined us at the time. And
a year later, you look back and it's like the timing for you guys to trade those guys was perfect because Paul George's trade value definitely went down after the horrible bubble he had, and then Westbrook's value pretty much tanked to the ground. So,
but the crazy thing is, we look at all these things that Presti did. He traded Paul George to L.A. for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, and Clippers' first-round draft picks in 2022, 2024, and 2026, along with 2 first-round choices via Miami, and we obtained the right to swap first-round picks in 2023 and 2025.
So what is that, 4 or 5 picks? First-round picks? Second-round picks.
Along with Shai and Gallinari, who's going to leave now, but I mean, Shai has so much.
Shai is an all-star. He will be an all-star for years to come. Gallo was actually a really good piece with them, along with CP3. But it'll be interesting to see what you guys do with Gallo, right? I mean, he's a free agent. Do you sign? I think a sign and trade is the best pathway for you guys.
It is. What makes me think that it won't happen is because of the trades we did tonight. It just makes me wonder if he's just going to walk and we're trying to replace him. Pokashevsky, I mean, he's a big man, but he's going to play the floor, in my opinion. So, and then again, another trade. When we decided it was time to give up Westbrook, he wanted to go, and don't blame him because we were in a bad spot. Gave him up for Chris Paul, first-round picks in 2024 and 2026, and the right to swap first-rounders in 2021 and 2025. And at Chris Paul at the time, I mean, his
value was pretty much what Westbrook's is now.
Yeah, it's crazy. They literally swapped, and we got so much for him. He had a great year, just a lot that you did not expect, and he brought us
it's crazy how much has changed over the last year, right? I mean, Westbrook was traded for CP3, and the Rockets had to give up a couple first-round picks just to get Westbrook. Now, if you did this trade, it would be the other way around. So I think, I mean, just straight up, the Rockets got fleeced, right? I mean
man, not only does the Thunder have a great history now with Presti of winning trades, but Houston has a history of losing them as well.
Right.
And that's another example.
I mean, the only one that they've won is the James Harden trade, which was probably the best trade of the decade, if we're being honest, in terms of what they gave up.
Yeah, I still don't understand that. That might be Presti's only
for sure.
scratch.
But even that, I don't think he moves them if the owners aren't pushing to like not pay the tax, which
that was really the reason. Yep.
Which, looking back at it now, is stupid because James Harden, Westbrook, and Durant, and they really didn't get a chance after 2012 when they made the finals, right? And they lost to LeBron, right? I mean, most teams lose to LeBron.
Yeah.
And I just think they weren't even close to the peak, which is crazy. That'll be one of the big what-ifs in NBA history. But I think Presti's really improved just the overall outlook of the Thunder with these last few trades.
Yeah, for sure. And then lastly, but not least, I mean, this just happened not too long ago. Sam Presti decided to trade Chris Paul and Abdel Nader to Phoenix. And I don't know how, man. But we got Kelly Oubre Jr., Ricky Rubio, Ty Jerome, Jalen LeCay, and a 22 first-round pick from the Suns. And like I said earlier, we did flip Rubio, which
to move up to take Pokusevski.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure. I feel like Pokusevski is there at one of those two picks, but
yeah, I don't know, man.
I mean, the Thunder found their guy. I think they're confident in him, so.
Yeah, so the point of all of that is, I mean, Sam Presti, he just eats, sleeps, and gets first-round picks. That's all he does. And a lot of these guys, I mean, these guys are in, 7th, 8th grade now.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how those picks land.
2022. I mean, 2022 could be a valuable pick, right? Because CP3 will be most likely out of the Suns, maybe even out of the league by then. And the Suns are the team that they never seem to get it right for multiple years.
And 2022 is the draft of Amoni Bates and Chet Holmgren, so
yeah,
that'll be interesting.
That could be huge.
These guys are studs, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Kelly Oubre is definitely the piece of this trade.
Oh yeah.
It'll remain to be seen what they do with him, right? I mean, he's on an expiring deal. Do they see him as a guy that they can have a part of the franchise for years to come, or do they move him for some picks, right? I mean, I think that's the most likely with Sam Presti.
You never know with Presti, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah. Just overall, OKC is just headed in a great direction.
I think it's a great time to be a fan of the Thunder, and a really uncomfortable time to play for the Thunder, because at any moment you could be gone.
Right, they've been the weirdest team of the decade, right? Which is the talent that they've drafted, but at the same time the talent that they've lost. And then later in the decade, right, you see the talent that they've got. So it's just a really interesting timeline.
We've had a weird decade of, first we were the team that had all the flashy players and didn't necessarily make the greatest moves,
right,
to now we are, I don't know, we're very, just a lot of intellectual decisions by Presti that I think are going to work out very well.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's going to be all that we have for today.
Yeah.
This should be up on Friday in the morning or at night. We're not sure yet, but if you guys did enjoy, make sure to drop a like. And if you aren't subscribed, I'm not sure what you're doing there. But
come on, man.
But, yeah, that'll be it for us. Love you guys. Peace out.
See ya.